People who quit their jobs on the first day. What was your I'm out of here moment? Story 1. Worked in a hotel for a day. No one told me where anything was, and I got chewed out for it. Guests enjoying their meals told me to pay no mind and I was doing a good job and that my boss is a jerk. I told the manager that I was quitting and I wouldn't be doing the next shift. I arrived the next day returning a work uniform and my supervisor approached me and yelled at me for being late. I told her I already quit, but if I was working, technically I was 5 hours early for my shift. Absolute nutcases. Story 2. I got a job at a Build-A-Bear knockoff at the end of a mall that wasn't very busy. My interview with the owners was interesting. They were an older couple who said they had wanted to open a Chick-fil-A, but you need about $1 million to do that. My first day, one other girl was working and she didn't really talk to me. I had basically no training and she disappeared into the back. I was standing at the register area, which was underneath a giant storybook mushroom. A mother and her young son walk in and start to look at the bear skin options. I greeted them and left them to look around. They ended up leaving after a couple minutes and my coworker reappeared from the back with the cordless phone and handed it to me. It was my boss. He told me that when a customer walks in, he wants me to come out from under the mushroom to greet them. "Come out from the mushroom!" he screamed. After he finished speaking to me, I hung up and went to the coworker and asked about the phone call. She said the place has cameras set up and the owners watch them from their house and call in a lot. I did not come back into work after that day. Story 3. Fast food chain. I was 17. I found out during training that the place had been robbed 3 times in the past month and one employee was seriously injured. Not worth the $5 an hour. I mean, do they really think we're gonna take a bullet for them? Like we're gonna scream, "Not on my watch," and dive over the counter? No. Story 4. I applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant. I celebrated my birthday there every year. Owner asked me to come in for basically a tryout. As I communicated, I was looking at other job possibilities. I come in and they just stick me on dishwashing for an hour. No biggie. Then their dishwasher doesn't show up. So the kitchen manager asked me to stay on for their lunch rush, saying I'll get paid for the hours. I do. Kitchen staff was nice, so I was happy to help out even though I figured I'd be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably wouldn't be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple weeks and he tells me to email the owner to pick up my paycheck. I do. She basically tells me to screw off over text. Tells me that it was staging and she told me I wouldn't be paid. I respond that I understand, but I stayed an extra 3 hours which I was told I'd be paid for. She stops responding. I decide I want to be petty over the $40, so I get the state labor department involved. Dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours, including the first staging hour. Couple of weeks later, I got my $40. Never went back to the restaurant. Oh, and the restaurant closed down 3 weeks after I got that paycheck. Story 5. My very first job was at a little drive-in restaurant close to my high school. I showed up to work the first day. The lady said I had to pay her $50 for training. She showed me around the place and said that my pay would be $4.50 an hour as a car hop. This was in 2010, and all the tips I made went into a bucket with all the other girls' tips. At the end of the night, she counted up tips, kept 20% for herself, and split the rest evenly among every employee. Also, part of our job was 1 day a week we had to spend 4 hours cleaning her house. It seemed super shady. Story 6. Salesman for Kirby Vacuums. First sale call was to a single elderly woman who was supporting her son in the hospital. The supervisor training me pushed and pushed to make the sale until this old woman was in tears. Just as she was about to sign the paperwork, I asked if she really wanted the vacuum, and she said it was lovely, but she couldn't afford it. I took the paperwork away from her and said not to worry. Outside, I told the supervisor I quit, to which he replied, "I would have been fired anyway." No love lost. I hung around for half an hour playing on my phone to make sure the supervisor left, because he was a real piece of work. Story 7. I interviewed for professional marketing assistant and got the job straight away. I was under the impression that I would be an assistant to the man I was interviewed by. When I showed up for my first day, the same waiting room I was in the previous day was full of people. I quickly learned that we were all hired, and that I would be a door-to-door salesperson selling some pretty useless product. I spent my entire day inside a Starbucks applying for other jobs and went home. Got paid, but never went back. Story 8. Not me, but I was training a new lifeguard. After our shift was mandatory staff training for our entire crew where we practice rescues. Once she found out we actually had to practice and go in the water, she just walked out. Not really sure what kind of job she thought she had signed up for. Story 9. I technically quit before my first day. I got hired at a well-known gift store. I was hired with the understanding that I would work Saturdays and Sunday, and a grand total of 8 hours a week. So 2 4-hour shifts, also at minimum wage. Not a problem with me, done that before. I would just pick up a part-time job for the rest of the week. Nope, apparently that wasn't allowed. The manager thought that was a horrible thing and disrespectful to her. I should only work for them and only them, and I should have better control over my money. If I can't survive on $64 a week before taxes, yeah. Didn't show up because screw that. She called in pissed that I wouldn't show up to such an opportunity. Story 10. Started a new job unloading shipping containers and was told they had to be empty by midday. This was imperative because a new one was going to arrive early in the afternoon. It was a 2-man job if we both worked our butts off to get it done. Boss says, also your offsider is off work today. You need to get this cleared by yourself. I just walked out. Even if it was a trial by fire, I wasn't interested in working for people like that. Screw that. Story 12. Ended up being a scam to try and get free labor. I went for a job interview as the security guard. A man and woman asked me my name, asked how strong I was, then hired me and asked me to start immediately. That started alarm bells ringing. 2 questions in an interview and I'm employed and working with no discussion about anything else. They took me down to their warehouse and told me to start moving boxes from a shelf into a truck. I said, hang on, this job is security, not manual labor. And then they started getting really angry at me, saying that if you want the job, then you need to do this as a part of it. I was like, yeah, nah, I'm out, and walked out. Total scam. There was no job, and it really made me angry because I could have gone to another interview at that time, but chose to go there instead. Story 13. I had a job for 1 day selling home security equipment door to door. The whole idea was basically to make it seem like you're doing them a service and then lock the customer into 5-year contracts. My supervisor and I were in this one home of a family that hardly spoke English. The father said they had been struggling with finances, but my supervisor kept pushing it on them, and the customer seemed like he didn't fully understand what was going on. I couldn't in good conscience take these people that were already struggling and put them in a worse position. Story 14. I was hired to be a waitress, which had a lower hourly wage due to tips. The entire shift they had me wash dishes in the sink, but paid me a waitress wage. A few months later, the restaurant was investigated for a number of fraud activity. Story 15. I answered an ad for a babysitting job. I was already working on a casual basis, but it was sporadic, so I thought after some hours, babysitting would be welcome extra cash. The couple were both in the military and proceeded to tell me that I would be staying in the spare room and looking after their 6-month-old child around the clock as well as doing the housework. I would have 1 day off every 2 weeks. They said it is cash in hand so I could sign into the dole to make up the rest of the money. I left on the spot. They wanted a live-in housemaid and nanny, not a babysitter, and they were not able to pay for one. Why they thought it was up to me to illegally collect the dole to subside them, I don't know. Story 16. It was a patrol station, and the manager wanted me to work for free until I had learned their computer systems to what he deemed a satisfactory extent. I agreed to do it because I needed a job, and he brought me in at 7 a.m. on the first day. However, he was not present to go through the training with me, so I was just standing around kind of helping out on the forecourt, but not really knowing what I should be doing, not learning anything. After about an hour and a half without the manager showing up or anyone training me on anything, I decided that I wasn't going to continue to be taken advantage of and told the cashier to pass on the message to the manager. I had quit. Story 17. It was a waitress gig for a local restaurant. I finished my first day, then was told that the training would continue for 6 weeks. While I was in training, all of the tips that I got had to be given to my trainer. I was being paid less than $2 an hour. I called in the next day and said it wasn't going to work out. Story 18. It was my first day at Five Guys. It was around 10:30 p.m. and they told me it was time to clock out, despite not having finished closing. I clocked out, and then they told me I had to continue working until closing was done. I then worked until almost midnight, unpaid. I did not return. Story 19. Crappy motel gig in New York City when I was young and desperate for a job. Any job. Came in to relieve the cigarette hag overnight lady who told me about the bat she kept beneath the counter, which rooms had the hookers, and which rooms were for the genuinely lost tourists. How not to give out towels to certain people because they had 10 plus people to a room and they were trying to get them to leave. While she was talking to me, one of the hookers came up and paid her with sweaty boob money. Also, they expected me to do laundry in the back room in between babysitting the front desk. Also, to watch out for stray needles or paraphernalia in the sheets. I overheard a man in the lobby talking on the phone about how he had a friend who was in jail and he was going to hire him to off his cousin who was in the same jail, all in between bites of the bargain bin Fruit Loops from the breakfast. I left. They never sent me my check for working that day and I never called in to get it. Thanks so much for making it to the end of the video. If you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. I make content like this every single day, so you'll always have an awesome story to listen to.